it's my opportunity to introduce to you Tracy Brower. Tracy holds a PhD in sociology of work, as well as a master's of management in organizational effectiveness and a master's of corporate real estate. Tracy is a work environment sociologist and principal of applied research and consulting at Steelcase. She is the author of Bring Work to Life by Bringing Life to Work, a guide for leaders, organizations which focus on work-life fulfillment. Tracy is also a contributor to Forbes, as well as an executive advisor for CODA Societies and for the MSU Professional Mathematics Program. She is also a board member for the FM Research and Benchmarking Institute. With that, let me introduce Tracy Brower.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it and really looking forward to our conversation today. Thanks to you, Jerry, and thanks to Kim for all of your work to get this ready and going, and huge thanks to NBS. You have just been an amazing partner to us and really value our partnership and all that you add and contribute with customers and in our family together. So anyway, thanks for having us. Thanks all for being here. I think these are really interesting times, and some of you may be old enough to remember when we used the word paradigm all the time. It became a professional jargony term, and it was kind of a joke if you used it in a meeting anymore because it was so overused and incorrectly used. But it is actually so apt for today. When the paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. This is the idea that when the automobile is created, it doesn't matter how great your buggy is, you won't be selling many buggies. And I think the interesting thing for us to think about is how our paradigm is shifting and how that changes our lives in terms of being individual people, in terms of the companies we work for, and in terms of the companies that we serve. So let's talk about a few paradigms that are going to be shifting. Consider the paradigm of safety and security. I think this is fascinating times. We all learned about Maslow's pyramid in high school, and we spent lots of time at the top of the pyramid. We worried about if people had a sense of belonging, and we worry about if people feel valued and if they have a sense of esteem. We worry about if people have an opportunity to self-actualize, and those are really important things. But many of us have been bumped right back to the bottom of that Maslow hierarchy, and we worry about things like physiological health and safety. We worry about safety and security concerns, and those are a very big deal. That is one of the paradigms that has shifted. You've always gone to an office that you felt like was clean and safe, probably, but now all of a sudden it is top of mind, and that is driving a lot of business today. So as we think about business winners and losers, safety and security is huge. Companies that have a core competence of safety and security, services or products that make us feel safe, cleaning products, cleaning services, even there's a wonderful example of a tiny company that made plexiglass, and they're going gangbusters right now. The other thing that's interesting here is even if a company's core competence isn't safety or security or cleanliness, companies and organizations that make us feel safer and more secure will be the ones that we go to. It'll be the restaurant that feels really safe and secure and clean. It'll be, someday we'll go back to movies. Someday it'll be the movie theater that feels safest and cleanest. That will succeed. So business winning and losing will have a lot to do with the paradigm of safety and security. The other paradigm that is shifting is all about health and well-being. Teladoc Health has grown from 2% market share to 70% market share. We're thinking about our health differently. We're thinking about it more holistically, and it's top of mind on the news every night, of course. Well-being and mental state are also huge. 75% of people are reporting that they feel a sense of social isolation. 67% of people are stressed. 57% of people are anxious. I must be anxious. And so that is a very big deal. Organizations that supply to that kind of need will absolutely go crazy. And we're already seeing a rise in social work, a rise in counseling services, a rise in apps that provide for mental health and mental well-being. Relationships are also key. We are seeing absolute magnification of the relationships going on around us. Our worlds have gotten really small, and so the dynamics of relationships are absolutely magnified. And so we're actually seeing a rise in the demand for divorce attorneys. We're seeing a rise in the demand for marriage licenses, and we're seeing a rise in the need for family counseling. So all of those kinds of things are important to our reality. Again, the reason we want to talk about this is because this is our context that we're living in. It's the context of the companies we work for and the potential innovations and new businesses that we enter into, and it's the context for the customers that we serve. Life cycle is another really interesting one to think about. Any good demographer will tell you that the businesses that win and lose will follow life cycles successfully. So if we have a baby boom in the next 6 to 9 months, we will see lots of companies doing really, really well, selling things like diapers and cribs. And then a couple years later, we'll see companies on the rise who are selling toddler toys. You get the idea. That is an interesting way to think about business wins and losses. The other thing to think about is the experience of home. We are just home more. And so we may be using our coffee machine at home more than we are using our coffee machine in the office. And so it gets more wear and tear. So we replace it more. Or we're going through supplies at home that we would normally be using when we're out. And so new supplies are in demand. And we're looking around our houses saying, you know, honey, maybe it's time to redo the deck, or wow, that carpeting is looking a little more worn than I remembered it. We are investing in our experience of home. This is interesting too. Home offices are on the rise, home furniture is on the rise. And if you talk to realtors, the number one thing that people are looking for in new home sales right now and existing home sales is home offices. The other thing that's happening is that we are seeing a shift in our perception of receive versus retrieve. Our model used to go out and retrieve. We used to go shopping, go to the grocery store, go out and eat. And now we are receiving so many things at home. So we're seeing delivery services and ghost kitchens. Travel obviously is changing, and entertainment is changing as well. Think about how we refer to our sin taxes in the US. Alcohol sales are at an all-time high. Online gambling is up. Even things like binge watching is up. Puzzle sales are at an all-time high, and bicycle sales are up as well. This matters to us because it's how we live, it's how we serve our customers, and this is all about the companies we work for and how we respond effectively. So here's a question for you. In terms of the changes, go ahead and put this in the Q&A box. You can find that box as Jerry mentioned. And if you just want to put an A, B, C, or D in that box, that would be brilliant. This is top of the head. Don't give it lots of thought. Just pop something there that makes sense. Here's the question. How significant do you expect the changes in the work experience to be? A, sweeping, things will never be the same. B, moderate, things will be different, but may not be too overwhelming. C, insignificant, things will be crazy for a while, but then they will pretty much get back to normal. Or D, I'm not sure, things seem to be changing daily. Take a minute and go ahead and answer that question if you don't mind. While you're thinking about it, I will tell you that one of the things I think is an interesting analogy is that of being on a boat. You know how if you go out on a boat for the day and you're enjoying your friends and the sunshine, you come back at the end of the day and you're just exhausted and you say to yourself, why am I so exhausted? All I did was enjoy my friends and sunshine and lounge on a boat all day. The reason is actually physical, that when you're on a boat, you're constantly reacclimating and finding equilibrium because you're always a little bit out of balance on the water. Even if you're sitting on the boat, you're constantly rebalancing. Good for the abs, they say. That is why you're tired at the end of the day. And that's kind of the situation we're in today as well. Things are so up and so down and they're changing constantly. It's kind of like you're always finding a new equilibrium. So I've given you some time to think about the question, and I wonder, Jerry, if you could tell us what in our highly scientific study, what is the preponderance of answers? What are you mostly seeing here? A's, B's, C's, or D's?
Well, it looks like we've had, as you said, kind of a smattering across the board, and I also think that there may be a challenge with the Q&A feature that may be on the Teams event, but I think predominantly we're seeing that D. People seem to see things changing daily, kind of like the news that we hear every day with regards to the post-COVID.
Wow. Oh, that's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that feedback. This is the first, I've asked this question so many times because I'm doing my own little study, but it's really unusual to get mostly Ds. But I will absolutely say that we're seeing more and more Ds every week. I think we are so in this moment of, gosh, I don't even know anymore. At the beginning, we were concluding some things about the pandemic, and then we learned more, and then we learned more, and now we're not even sure where we are. Sometimes it feels like we're in a time warp together, but at least we're together in the time warp. So yeah, things are changing daily. I think the other thing that we know here is that your experience may be really different depending on your job, your region, your seniority, your tenure with your company, your family situation, your connections with others in the global environment. All of those can make a difference in your perceptions on this question. If we take things at a meta level, overall, we believe that this will be the most significant reinvention of work in our experience. This is going to be a center point in our lives, a pivot point in our lives. No matter how old you are or how long you've been at your company, you will look back and the previous times will feel dinosauric and ancient, and you will look forward and things will be different eventually. But this will absolutely be a center point. And here's our opportunity. We can come back from the coronavirus. We can make good decisions. We can do really good things in our workplaces as a result of the coronavirus. But our real opportunity is to reimagine and to do things even better for the future than what we might have done them. I have an article coming out Sunday night on new technology trends, and I talked to the research director at the CTA, the Consumer Technology Association. Brilliant man. And one of the things he talked about is how a lot of the technology has been in the works, but we have absolutely accelerated our innovations, and we're accelerating, as a matter of fact, our acceptance of some of those innovations. So this is our moment to move in new directions and to reimagine and do some really great things. Working from home is absolutely here to stay. We have talked to so many customers, literally hundreds of customers. Every single customer says work from home will continue. Some customers say it's going to be a small proportion of their work. Some customers say it will be a bigger proportion of their work, but we know there will be an expanded ecosystem which includes working from home. And lots of us have been doing this. We do global work and we've been doing remote work, but the scale and ubiquity is new. And working from home can be exhausting. We're doing a great job with working from home. We're productive and we're staying in the game and we're pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, but we're starting to hit a wall and it can be really exhausting. It can be fulfilling, it can be exhausting. The bottom line is it's not an either or. Our more productive conversation is going to be about where we can do our best work and to make selections about that. And one of the things we absolutely know is that the office cannot go away. There are some really compelling reasons that we want to pay attention to the office, that we want to keep the office, that we want to get people back to the workplace as safely as we can in a really compelling kind of environment. So here's the first reason that the office absolutely cannot go away, and that is all about innovation. Innovation comes from the edges. It is very unusual for a breakthrough idea to come from the person in the center of the discipline who's been thinking about it their whole career, who's steeped in it. A lot of times it's that idea from the edge, from someone who's objective, who's not deeply steeped, who says, hey, what about this? Have you thought about this? Who kind of doesn't know all of the existing perceptions and assumptions in the field. The other place that innovation comes from is disparate ideas. We put lots of different ideas together in order to come up with something new. And the office is uniquely important to these two things. The person that you see in the work cafe who's outside of your discipline will make you think about things in a new way. You'll run into that person in the coffee bar and they'll have an idea and you'll talk about something, and you'll run into the person in the elevator lobby and talk about something else. And then you'll be in your project team meeting and you will put those diverse ideas together and you will come up with something new. The office does an incredibly efficient, an effective job of connecting us with disparate ideas. And we need a fast flow of information. Innovation requires us to move quickly with information density and build. And so we can never have technology that can keep up with us quite as well. Technology can do a great job and we can do so much virtually, but there is something about being in the office and being able to build and maybe interrupt now and then and jump on somebody's idea and say, absolutely yes, or maybe not so much. Here's another way to think about it. That is where innovation comes from. And being physically together is a really big part of successful innovation. One other point here. In about 2008, lots of companies sent employees home. They were seeking to save money. There was a huge economic collapse in 2008, 2009-ish. And many of those companies, in fact, all of those companies have actually come back. They've brought people back and they've been really clear that they weren't as able to be competitive, they weren't as able to differentiate, and they weren't as able to be innovative with everybody working from home. There is something really special about the office in terms of innovation. So here's another question for you. Again, use the Q&A box if you don't mind. To what extent do you expect shifts in the way your company adds value to the market? A, massively, the pandemic has brought about a reboot and a reimagining of our business. B, moderately, some of what we do will change, but overall, we're still delivering value that's relevant to the times. C, minimally, we're continuing to deliver on our fundamental value occasions without tremendous change. Or D, I have no idea, but I'll keep thinking about it. So give some thought to this for yourself. As you think about your company and the value that your company adds to the marketplace, how much do you expect that to shift? In what ways do you expect that to shift? Massively, moderately, minimally, or you'll plead the fifth on this one? Jerry, are we starting to see any votes coming in on this one?
So Tracy, I regret to inform you that apparently the producer error, which is me, may have made a mistake as it relates to the Q&A session. So right now we aren't receiving any Q&A, so we might want to just keep moving forward and we'll keep working on it.
All right, sounds good. You know, that is the thing about this. We are all adapting, we are all learning, and it is all good. Usually people here say moderately. That is the most prevalent response because I think a lot of us are finding shifts in our core business. Like there may be things that are core to your business that aren't going away, and there may be things that are brand new that you're adding. There may be some things that you're modifying, but most companies are making some shift in some way, and some are even more massive than that. Here is another thing that is critical about the office, and that is all about talent and engagement. When people are in the office together, they are so much more engaged. One of the things that we know is that there's brain drain if you work too much from home. The more people work from home, statistically, the more likely they are to be engaged in a side hustle. The more they're engaged in side hustles, the more likely they are to make that side hustle into a full-time career. The other thing that's interesting here is that when you're home, you might be more likely to be multitasking because you're just not in front of your people in a room together. We could all multitask in conference rooms, and some people were misbehaved in this area and some people were less misbehaved in this area. But at home, we can be even more likely to be multitasking, or we're folding laundry during the project meeting, or we're trying to work on our emails during the work team meeting. Those things are much more prevalent at home. The other thing about home is the idea of security concerns. 84% of IT leaders report that they're worried about security concerns. People fall victim to phishing more often. They tend to be less careful about privacy and confidentiality of company information when they're working from home. But here's the other thing that's utterly critical from a talent and engagement standpoint, and that is all about social capital. We are absolutely connected human beings. We are tribe animals and herd animals, and we want to be connected with other people. And so not being able to be as connected is both mentally challenging and emotionally challenging. And social capital is about the bonds that we form with each other that are part of our humanity. Social capital works best when we have a very thick weave in the organization. Social capital capital is those relationships I have with other people where I can learn from them and get feedback from them, maybe network with them to another role or a growth opportunity. Social capital is absolutely something that's struggling today. We have a certain amount of social capital when we went into the pandemic, and we are functioning on that social capital today. I heard a wonderful head of real estate and facilities just yesterday say that he thinks social capital is like a bank. You're making deposits into that bank all the time in terms of forming relationships, building relationships, and you can do that so much more effectively in the workplace. When you're away from the workplace, you're making withdrawals from that social capital bank account. You're calling on people that you might normally not call on. You're not able to make as many deposits because you're not seeing people as much. Social capital is critical to all of those things that I mentioned: learning, feedback, growth, and it's also really important to our mental health and well-being. Social capital is also something that is very present focused. I heard another brilliant real estate and facilities leader who said, well, the reason people are working so effectively from home today is because we built wonderful workplaces and work experiences for them up until now. They've been able to build their social capital because they've had a great place to work. But now we're in a situation where my present social capital is as good as it gets, and then I need to return to the workplace to be able to build it up. One of the reasons that the workplace is so great with talent and engagement is because you get an efficiency factor. You know, I can go to the coffee machine in the morning and I can run into Kathy, Loanne, Keith, and Amalia all in about 5 minutes, and I can keep up with them and connect with them, and we feel good about kind of staying connected to each other. They're not necessarily people that I would set up a half-hour meeting with once a week to stay connected. That would be inefficient, and I might not have a half hour's worth of discussion with them, but being in the office engages us, keeps us connected, and builds our social capital. So social capital is one of the reasons that the office cannot go away. Talent and engagement are absolutely critical to that conversation. The other thing that you're probably already thinking about is the relationship to attraction and retention. Many people say that one of the reasons they come to the office is for the office, but a really big reason they come to the office is other people. Think about the office as an iceberg, or think about culture, as a matter of fact, as an iceberg. This is an Edgar Schein model of culture. So think about that iceberg, and then under the water level are the hidden assumptions and values and norms and the things that guide the culture in an intangible way. Above the water level of that iceberg is place. Place is the most visible artifact of culture. It sends all kinds of signals in terms of how much we value collaboration, how much we value employee well-being, the extent to which we support people with tools and technology, the extent to which there are privacy options available or rejuvenation options available. All of those send messages about the culture, about what we value, and about what we focus on. Without place, culture is doing really hard work. Culture is what people do when no one's looking, or how things get done around here. And when we send everybody home, all of a sudden culture is true north, because you can't kind of look to that leader who's walking through your space. You can't catch the vibe from your colleagues or kind of look up and ask a quick question about something. So place and the bringing together of people in place is absolutely hampered. Distance is detrimental. The other thing that's true here is that place sends such a message about attracting people. The number one reason that people join an organization is for the gestalt of the organization, that overall feeling of what that organization is going to provide in terms of growth and the people that feel like a match and the values that feel like a match when you interview. The number one reason that people stay with an organization is because they have a best friend at work. That is laid out in a book called Vital Friends by Tom Rath. The place is where that happens. You can connect virtually, you can be together on digital methodologies, absolutely, and that works pretty well. But being in place together sends cues, it reinforces behavioral norms, and it gives us the tools through which we can connect and collaborate and be in proximity together. So another reason that the office absolutely cannot go away is because of attraction and retention, and because of those connections we make with each other. I'm not going to ask you to answer this question, but I will just mention it. To what extent do you believe the work experience is part of attracting and retaining people? This one's really interesting. Most people say that they believe it's really important. Here's something pretty cool. In our industry, we have talked for a long time about making sure that work experience and workplace are on the minds of senior leaders, people who sign the checks and make the decisions, and maybe many of you are those people. We've wanted to get that on the minds of senior leaders as an industry, and we've wanted to make it top of mind for senior leaders as an industry. And we are in a moment of doing that. We are appreciating place based on its absence. And that is interesting times. Lots of people who weren't thinking a whole bunch about the workplace 6 months ago are really thinking about how critical it is today. And so we have this opportunity, as I was saying before, to reimagine and rethink how that workplace can make a really big difference for us. Here is another reason that the office cannot go away, and that is all about purpose. There is an Harvard study that's written up in the Harvard Business Review that talks about how purpose is critical for organizational success. It is one of the things that separates organizations who are successful from organizations who are not so much. Purpose is that common sense of being together toward a common goal. Purpose is three things. It is, number one, a sense that there's something bigger than yourself. Number two, a sense that you can uniquely contribute to that. Number three, a sense that it has to do with people. We will all sign up as good corporate citizens for 15% annualized growth for our company, but the thing that will really get us out of bed in the morning is knowing that that has an impact on people. And so purpose is critical to an organization's success. There's a wonderful study by the Society for Human Resource Management, that is SHRM, and they found that 65% of companies are struggling with morale. People need to be together to have a sense of morale and to have a sense of purpose. This is about line of sight. Literally, line of sight is, being able to look across and see people who are kind of working on other things and see who you might want to connect with. Figuratively, line of sight is knowing how my work relates to your work and then your work and then his work and then the customer and how it makes a difference. And so that line of sight is critical. We want to be part of a unified experience. And what's pretty cool about the workplace is that we are showing up together for common purpose. I may see somebody across the work cafe that I've never met before, but we are here together doing work for a common purpose. I may walk in through the parking lot into the front door with somebody that I've never met before, but we happen to work in the same company, and we are there together for a common purpose. That is powerful stuff, and that's a really important reason that the workplace cannot go away. Energy is super closely related to that as well. The bandwagon effect is a sociological concept that says that we derive energy from people around us and from crowds and big groups. And so we absolutely can work virtually. We absolutely can use digital platforms. But there's something about getting together in a conference room and feeling the energy of the group. There's something about getting together in a town hall meeting with a few hundred people and connecting virtually to your other global locations. We take energy from that because we are unified together and because we feed on the energy of each other, whether we're hearing bad news and experiencing that together, or hearing great news and experiencing that together, or being confused together even. The other thing about this is all about communication effectiveness. There's a brilliant book called Team of Teams by General McChrystal, and he talks about his experiences leading the troops in Afghanistan. And he did something really counterculture in the military. He gave lots and lots of people tons of confidential information in a very immediate way. That was powerful because it created information density. People could make really good decisions because they had tons of really good information, contextual information, and relevant information, so they could react quickly and make good decisions. That is part of this as well. When we are together in place, information travels. Maybe I'm in a town hall meeting with a couple hundred people, or maybe I'm just overhearing something in the work cafe, or maybe I'm having a conversation with a friend in the elevator bank, and we just have that moment to say, hey, did you hear about such and such? That is information density. That is the energy that comes from being together in place. Humanity is also really critical, and this is another reason that the office cannot go away. Connection is critical to our health. I talked about how our instinct is to come together. When, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, when we're faced with threat or danger, we want to have strength in numbers. And that's one of the things that's been so tough about this pandemic is we can't be with our people. We've got a small group of people that we might be seeing regularly, but we can't find strength in numbers. That causes cognitive dissonance because it's just not what we're used to. The other thing about this is that we tend to generate a sense of identity based on our roles. So I'm a wife or a partner or a mother or a father or an aunt or an uncle, or I'm a colleague or a team leader or a people leader or a project leader. Those things are really important to who we know we are and what our sense of identity is. And that is played out more powerfully in space when we're together physically. 71% of people are having a really hard time adjusting to work from home, even though we know we're encountering it for a long time now, and we're having some mental health challenges. It is because we are separated and our instinct is to be much more connected. Place is a very, very special thing here. Work is fundamentally social. We might be introverts, we might be extroverts, that's all good. We all need time alone and we all need time together. We just need it in different proportions. And the workplace is a fundamental place that we get those social needs met. Whether we have high needs for social or low needs for social, the workplace is a place where we need to be for our humanity. Empathy is another really good and closely related concept that we want to just talk about. And that is the idea that physical distance can turn into psychological distance. If we don't see each other very much, it's really hard to be in sync. I'm just going to go a little woo-woo on you here. In our brain science, there is something called limbic resonance. Limbic resonance is when your neurons are firing in concert with the person that you're with. There's a mirroring that goes on, both in terms of our postures. We tend to echo each other in posture, and we want to get in sync in terms of our nonverbals. 93% of information we collect from nonverbal sources. And when we're looking at a screen, it's a lot harder to pick up on micro expressions. So it's harder to get in sync with the people around us. That causes cognitive dissonance and stress. That makes this idea of limbic resonance harder. It's harder to be in resonance with other people when we're not in person. The other thing that's interesting about this is the idea of psychological safety. When we have psychological safety, we feel like we can be all of ourselves. We can bring ourselves to work fully. We can go out on a limb. We can share the weird idea. We can bring our crazy sense of humor. And we know we're not going to be mocked or ostracized. We might be teased a little bit in a good way, but we know that we will be accepted. When we see each other more in physical proximity, we tend to build those relationships and build that acceptance. Psychologically speaking, the number one reason that we have a sense of acceptance is because something is very familiar. Psychological safety is going to take on a new meaning. We're going to be thinking about, can we trust somebody to wear their mask at the right time? Can we trust somebody to be washing their hands effectively? Can we trust somebody to be social distancing and not putting our team at risk? Psychological safety is important. That opportunity to have empathy with other people and build those relationships is critical. That happens best face to face. There's a brilliant book called The Village Effect by Susan Pinker, and she really talks about how our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health are all significantly impacted by face-to-face relationships. When people have a lack of face-to-face relationships, they tend to have higher morbidity and higher mortality. So being together in an office is a very big deal for our health and well-being. Here's a question I typically ask is, what do you miss most about the office? And most people say A. I know I've already primed you for that by this point, and most people would say A, but there are lots of other things that we're missing about the office, and we'll talk a little bit more about those as well. Another reason that the office cannot go away has everything to do with variety and movement. From a neuroscience perspective, our brains are so incredibly bored. If you look at evolutionary psychology again, we've been used to highly stimulating environments, like we're surviving and we're watching out for predators and we're looking for prey so we can feed our families every night, and we're making fires and finding water. That is kind of where we've come from in terms of our brain science. And now we show up for work on camera with our, right clothing and our right messages and our right meetings. And that can be really, really boring for us. We need more stimulation. And I just think it's so interesting to think we can do lots and lots of things from home. We can eat at home, we can work out at home, we can shop from home, we can work from home, but just because we can doesn't mean we should. It's a really good idea to have tons of variety because that gives us the stimulation that we need. We want to go out to a restaurant and eat dinner. We want to go out and shop now and then in a safe, socially distanced manner, of course, and we want to get back to the office. Movement is a really healthy thing. We love to say your best posture is your next posture. And it's really hard to find enough opportunity to move. When you're on a campus or even in a small office, you're moving from room to room, or you're grabbing coffee, or you're meeting with friends over the water cooler. At home, you just don't have as much space to move. The other thing about movement and space is all about memory and learning. There's a brilliant study that was done. They took a whole bunch of college students and taught them something new, and then had them sit around and then had them take a test. In a different group, they taught them something new. They had them take a walk and then they gave them a test. And the groups that moved cemented their knowledge significantly more effectively. We are all like that. Our memories are better if we have movement after we learn something new, process something new, or participate in something new. And learning is like this too. Your memory is impacted by space. You remember, remember we talked about that thing in the work cafe, or remember we were standing in the atrium, we had that conversation, or remember we had the whiteboard and the post-it note on the upper right had that great idea and it was on that pink post-it note. We remember based on spatial attributes and spatial characteristics. The other thing here is time compression. We are all in this time warp together, and some of us aren't even sure what day it is anymore. And it feels like we've been in this world of the pandemic for a really long time. When we get out, when we get to an office, when we get back to a routine, we have more time stamps on what we're doing. That routine helps us to think about our days differently and helps us to remember differently and have a greater sense of orientation to where and when we are in the world. Boundaries are huge, right? This is a recent reversal. We've spent tons of time talking about how do we keep work separate and how do we leave work behind and how do we make sure we have space for our personal lives. And we're hearing lots of people now say, you know what? I'd like a little space from my personal life. How do I leave my personal life a little bit more behind? How do I leave behind that little tiff I was having with my partner, or those 6 loads of laundry that I don't want to think about? Going to an office is a really great thing in terms of boundary. Many of us love to have a connection between work and life. Work is part of a full life, and it's a very good thing. Family is super special and wonderful, but it's okay to have some distance from family and friends and the people that we're close to. Work is a wonderful thing, but it's good to have some separation. We need separation from both, and going to an office helps us have that separation. We already talked about culture and how culture is true north for an organization, and place is the body language of culture. We need places so that we can embody our culture, foster our culture, and really move our cultures forward in very positive ways. Here's another way to think about things. We've talked a little bit about why the office cannot go away. We've talked a little bit about new paradigms and new changes in business and resets. I think the other thing we need to think about now is how we consider choice and flexibility. Where on earth do we go from here related to the office? Where on earth do we go from here if the office is so critical to us and we're stuck at home, at least for a little while longer? as we get back, it will be really helpful to think about choice and flexibility in a few ways. One, we need to think about the choices we give people about where and when and how much they come back. If they come back. We may have people who are able to come back easily. We may have people who aren't concerned about coming back. We may have people who are really, really cautious and worried about coming back. And we've always talked as an organization about the importance of choice and how choice is correlated with engagement. This is choice on steroids in terms of letting people have a choice about whether they come back, how much they come back, and what that looks like. Case in point, the way that children go back to school will have a huge bearing on how employees go back to the workplace. You know, like state by state, this could be different. Community by community, it could be different. And childcare might be affected as well. So if my child is going to school Mondays and Wednesdays and your child is going to school Tuesdays and Thursdays, that will make a difference in our work schedule. Or if my child's going in the mornings and your child's going in the afternoons, that will make a difference. All of those things will come into play. So one element of choice is how much, whether, and when people come back. Another thing that's really interesting to think about is once they are back, how do we make sure that they have choice in the place? Let's make sure that we have enough variety in offices that people can really choose what feels best for them. I might feel safest in a more open part of my campus with airflow. You might feel safest in a conference room that's more enclosed and protected from viruses or germs. I might feel safest at a workstation I can go to every single day, every time, because I know I've cleaned it and I know it's clean. You might feel safest moving from workstation to workstation throughout the day or place to place throughout the day based on density. Those things will be important. From a flexibility standpoint, you want to make sure that you've got offices that can flex. We talked about how things are changing daily. And so interesting to consider that you might need a certain kind of application or floor plate today, and it might be different next month, and it might be different next month after that. So pre-vaccine, we'll want plenty of flexibility. And I think post-vaccine, we are also going to want to think about a macro level of flexibility. We're in the midst of COVID-19. Heaven forbid there's a COVID 2021. Heaven forbid there's something else that isn't a pandemic but messes with our business continuity. We need the ability to flex and really, really adapt in terms of our workplaces for all of those kinds of reasons. And let me say one other thing. I think we are in this moment where we say to ourselves, okay, workplace is important. We know it can't go away. We know it's critical, but what do we do? Should we be pressing the pause button? Should we be wondering and kind of paralyzed by an analysis process to figure out what's next? I think our right answer is to probably be action-oriented here. Sometimes there's a risk of inaction, and the way that we respond will be such a measure of our culture. It will be such a measure of our decision making and the way things get done and what we value. So sometimes there can be a risk of inaction. We want to put learning into action, and this will be a leapfrog thing. We are learning so much every day, and it will be so much easier to implement those learnings on an incremental basis versus waiting and waiting and waiting and then having to implement potential sweeping changes in the workplace. So there's a real opportunity to think about our changes incrementally and be able to take action and learn as we go. This is the idea of kind of walking into the water versus jumping into the deep end. Sometimes it's a lot more effective to walk into the water over time. Your culture is going to be demonstrated by your place as a destination. And I think this is also an opportunity to differentiate how we respond in terms of creating work experiences, in terms of taking care of people, in terms of respecting people, in terms of maintaining our business and staying competitive. Those will be huge messages for our customers, for our competitors, for our employees. And I think we set ourselves up for success by really, really being planful and intentional about the action that we can take. So it's a day when we can really, really move forward. I said this at the beginning, but I think it bears repeating. We can do a brilliant job of responding to the coronavirus. experience and finding the right answers and figuring out the right kinds of solutions in terms of the work experience. But our bigger opportunity is to go bigger. Our bigger opportunity is to reimagine and reshape and go to the places that we might have wanted to go anyway. And now we have an amazing trigger for that. You've heard it 1,000 times by now, Winston Churchill saying, never waste a good crisis. So it's sad and terrible that we're in the middle of this together, but we will get through it. And it is an opportunity for us to really, really think forward. You are all going to be receiving a book that I mentioned earlier called Joyful by Ingrid Fattel-Lee. You can think about creating joyful environments that have abundance, that celebrate, that bring people together in community. And there is just some wonderful, wonderful insight here. There's also a Steelcase 360 podcast where we interviewed Ingrid Fattel-Lee. So super excited to share that with all of you and for us to think about that future that will be joyful and abundant, and we will get through it together. So with that, let me turn it back to you, Jerry, and see if we have any questions we want to ask.
Well, we do apologize for the fact that we had some challenges with the questions, but what we'll do is we'll send a note out and solicit questions from those who attended, and we will turn around and respond with those questions, answers to those questions in the near future. Tracy, thank you very much. I'd like to turn it over to Kim now and let her close for us. Kim.
Hi, everyone. I don't know about you, but that went super fast. I was just listening, so thanks, Tracy. And on behalf of the entire Steelcase and NBS team, thanks for joining us today during our time to discuss Does Workplace Still Matter? I think all of us can agree after this conversation that it does more than ever. So we'd love to continue our conversation at a deeper level and share what our latest research and findings are, the case for place and the need to get it right. So we're reaching out to keep you guys keep sharing and learning together during these times. And lastly, as Tracy said, and thank you so much, NBS, for giving us a great book to read this summer. You'll get an email that will tell you how you can get a copy of that book sent to you. So this presentation has been recorded, so if you want to listen to it again or share it with anyone else. And we look forward to talking to you soon, and have a great rest of the day.